Alexander is the third person in the past year found dead in Newtown Creek after a night out. The bodies of John Castick and Carl Clemente turned up there about a month apart. Both men were last seen at the Brooklyn Mirage nightclub nearby.
I'm Lauren Conlon, and welcome to Midnight Currents, the Brooklyn nightclub drownings. As I record this podcast, I am treating it like an active investigation through research and boots-on-the-ground coverage. I have traced timelines on the ground. I have waited at the 90th precinct in Brooklyn for hours. I have been to where these bodies were recovered out of the murky waters of Newtown Creek, an arm of New York City's East River, and so much more. And for those non-New Yorkers out there, Newtown Creek isn't exactly a backyard creek that you play in with your childhood friends trying to catch frogs. Newtown Creek is between 3.8 to 4 miles long and has a surface area of roughly 140 acres. Actually, it's been called the most polluted waterway in America. I've been following the many deaths that have been connected to this waterway and New York City nightlife, and I cannot figure out why no one else has dug further, why this isn't a bigger story. Now, eventually, I will really be focused on the death of one young man in particular, 30-year-old Damani Alexander, or Alex, as his friends affectionately called him. He was found deceased in Brooklyn's Newtown Creek in July of 2024. However, his death was not ruled a drowning. It has been ruled as undetermined. And I've been speaking to Damani's mother, Desiree Nicholson, and she says there is no way he just fell in or accidentally fell in. She thinks foul play is involved, and she doesn't trust anyone. And unfortunately, that includes the detective on the case.
He said to me, obviously, it seems like he fell into the water, into the creek. And I said, how can that be? Damani was a soldier. Damani could swim. And I don't believe that Damani fell into no water. They claim that there are no surveillance outside of the club. And I find that hard to believe that such a big establishment would not have surveillance on the outside. I have no confirmation, no report, nothing at all from the detective. He never even called me to say anything. I have to be the one calling him every time to find out what's going on, what's the update.
And as a side, the medical examiner verbally told Desiree that there was cocaine found in Damani's system. However, not enough for an overdose, but we're still waiting on the full toxicology report. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details just yet, but I am open to every possible avenue here based on what I've uncovered thus far. I am not boxed into a serial killer theory, but we'll explore that. And I think you may see that my findings don't exactly point in that direction when it comes to Damani. However, I do think his death involved foul play. We're also going to explore Damani Alexander's death as it pertains to the nightlife scene in New York City. And you may remember that the summer before Alexander was found, two other men, Carl Clemente and John Castick, both successful and loved young men in their late 20s, were also recovered in Newtown Creek after leaving the popular nightclub, the Brooklyn Mirage. Now, I have only spoken to one of their families, so I'm not going to be heavily focused on those cases. However, you may end up hearing some new information from me, but I'm not focusing on their cases because it is not my goal to reopen any wounds that may have healed for these families. It's just important to acknowledge their deaths as this could be part of something bigger. But back to the Mirage. They spent millions of dollars in renovations over the last year and was supposed to open up in May of 2025. It never reopened, but more to come on that later. First, let's zoom out to see how this isn't just a New York thing. These tragic, quote, drowning patterns pop up in cities nationwide. And again, most of these deaths are ruled as an accidental drowning or undetermined. Because let's face it, what cop wants to tell the public that there's a possible serial killer on the loose? Back in the mid-2000s, retired NYPD detectives Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte teamed up with forensic psychologist Dr. Lee Gilbertson and started digging into a string of mysterious drownings of young men across the Midwest and the Northeast. This kicked off around 1997, and they noticed a very alarming pattern. There were over 40 cases of college-aged, athletic dudes, often out drinking, who vanished and later turned up dead in rivers or lakes. And the hook here was there was smiley face graffiti found near some of the recovery sites. So Gannon and Duarte theorized a serial killer, or a gang dubbed the Smiley Face Killers. They thought the Smiley Face Killers were targeting these guys, possibly drugging them with GHB and staging the scenes to look like drowning accidents. The theory blew up after a 2008 Dateline NBC episode where the detectives laid out their case, pointing to similarities like victim profiles and, of course, those very creepy smiley faces. They even self-published a book called Case Studies in Drowning Forensics in 2014 to push their findings, arguing that the body's conditions didn't always match accidental drownings. But the FBI and most local police just weren't buying it. Again, chalking up these deaths to drunk accidents, given how common drowning is among young men who have been drinking. So no arrests or any concrete evidence ever tied the cases to a killer. So the Smiley Face Killer, or killers, kind of remains more of a very chilling urban legend at this point over a proven crime spree. Although Gannon's team still insists there's something sinister at play. And what's even more chilling is that a source shared with me that the Brooklyn Mirage, prior to being renovated in 2025, had smiley face graffiti on some of the walls. Now, to me, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, graffiti runs rampant in New York City, and smiley faces aren't exactly unique, but nevertheless, it was pretty chilling to hear. Speaking of a music venue like the Mirage, let's go to Chicago and talk about the Salt Shed. So the Salt Shed was a newish music venue that opened in 2023, and sadly, a 26-year-old man, Noah Enos, vanished after a concert there on June 12th, 2023. Noah was attending a King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard show, sending Snapchat videos and texts to his girlfriend Nicole up until about 9:30 p.m. His phone went dead around 10 p.m., and he literally seemed to just disappear off the face of the earth. Despite frantic searches by family, friends, and Chicago police, he wasn't found until June 17th, when his body turned up in the North Branch of the Chicago River, right next to the Salt Shed's property. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office ruled it a drowning, but couldn't pin down whether or not it was an accident, homicide, suicide, or natural causes. No alcohol was noted in his system, and police found no clear signs of foul play. Noah's family thought the sudden disappearance was strange because surveillance only showed him walking north on Elston Avenue after the concert, and there were no other leads besides that. And for those not familiar with Chicago or the Salt Shed, Elston Avenue is literally where the Salt Shed is located. So Noah's case got extra buzz because it happened during a string of at least 16 bodies pulled from Chicago's river and Lake Michigan since early 2022. So of course, online theories again went wild about a possible serial killer, even throwing it back to possibly the Smiley Face Killer. But most of these deaths involved young people who had just gone out, who had been drinking, so the causes of death again were ruled either accidental drowning or undetermined. Chicago police and the FBI have said multiple times there's no evidence linking these cases and no serial killer at work. Then we have the Lady Bird Lake drownings in Austin, Texas. Lady Bird Lake is a very popular waterway in the downtown area, which has experienced a concerning number of drownings, mainly involving young men, over the past 2 decades. Literally, since 2004, nearly 200 people have drowned in or near Lady Bird Lake, with a large share being young men aged 22 to 44. Now, there were crazy rumors of a serial killer here. They actually came up with a name, the Rainy Street Ripper. And this was because many of these drownings were tied to the nightlife scene on Rainy Street in Austin. So young men were last leaving a bar on Rainy Street, and then they turned up dead. And of course, like everything else, these autopsies were generally classifying the deaths as accidental, showing no major signs of trauma or foul play. I mean, I sound like a broken record here. But let's get to the body of water that is the focus of this podcast, Newtown Creek in Brooklyn, New York. Newtown Creek is a toxic waterway snaking between Brooklyn's Greenpoint and Williamsburg area and Queens. As I mentioned earlier, it's an arm of the city's East River, and take it from me, it's so gross. It's dark, it smells, it's just so very uninviting, and it's been a dumping ground for bodies for over 150 years, from accidental to undetermined to straight up murders. And some say this area is targeted due to it being incredibly industrial and also having a party scene. In 1874, cops fished out an infant's body with a crushed skull from the Queens part of the creek. In 1910, a 12-year-old boy was said to have fallen in and drowned, and his clothes washed up nearby. In 1927, a man and a woman's bodies were recovered, possibly killed on a barge and tossed in. And then fast forward to April 2008, where a 54-year-old Queens man's body was pulled from the water in just a t-shirt and shorts, cause undetermined. Then October of 2017 brought the decomposed remains of an elderly woman found by an environmental worker, but no foul play was confirmed. As a side note, there is absolutely no reason that an elderly woman would be around Newtown Creek at all, and there is absolutely no reason why she would accidentally fall in. There's no reason why an elderly woman would be near a lumber yard or near a club in Brooklyn, and I don't have the case file. I am not familiar with her case, but I'm just putting things in perspective here. But one of the most chilling recoveries was in May of 1992 when sanitation workers hauled a 55-gallon oil drum from near North Henry Street, which is Brooklyn, and it contained the dismembered body of an unidentified white woman, aged 20 to 50, later linked to serial killer Joel Rifkin. He confessed to strangling her, she was victim number 9, and dumping her there, in Newtown Creek, as part of his murder spree that claimed at least 17 lives across New York City in the late 80s and early 90s. But let's pivot to the focus of this podcast. But keep in mind, the details I'm about to provide barely scratch the surface. We'll dig further on a later episode. In June of 2023, 27-year-old Carl Clemente vanished after leaving the Brooklyn Mirage and was later recovered from the Newtown Creek. His death was ruled a drowning, but the manner of death was ruled as undetermined. Carl Clemente was last seen allegedly on video footage running through a lumber yard. Police never released that footage. A month later, in July of 2023, 27-year-old John Kastick went missing from the same nightclub, the Brooklyn Mirage, and turned up dead in the Newtown Creek as well. This was ruled an accidental drowning. Then again, a year later, July of 2024, 30-year-old Damani Alexander's body was recovered after a night out, last seen leaving the Knockdown Center. The Knockdown Center is a club similar to the Mirage, also in Brooklyn, but Damani's body was recovered more on the Queens side of the creek. His death was not ruled a drowning. His death was ruled as undetermined. Now, he was the third man to be pulled out of Newtown Creek, which really fueled the serial killer chatter, which of course NYPD shut down. Now, I just want to add to this because also in June of 2024, an unidentified man was pulled out near the Williamsburg side of the water. And then July of 2025, just a few months ago, DJ Rada Brica, who was 52 years old, was found dead on a docked boat at the Newtown Creek Marina after going missing for weeks. He was last seen at a club in Harlem. Now, I don't necessarily know enough about him to know if his death was connected, but man, this is odd. Then, on September 4th, 2025, a decomposed body of an unidentified man surfaced off of Hunters Point, South Park on the Queens side of the water. And lastly, just days ago, on September 11th, 2025, another unidentified man in his 30s, apparently wearing a hospital bracelet from a month prior, was spotted floating near Apollo Street or North Henry in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, on, again, the Brooklyn side of the water. That investigation is ongoing, but preliminary reports say there was no obvious trauma to the body. But I think what's so concerning about these bodies washing up is that there seems to be clusters of them, and they're all males. Former lieutenant at the NYPD, John McCarry, isn't totally against the serial killer theory. Here's what he told me.
When I started seeing like the frequency of it, that's when I said, wow, it really seems like there's a serial killer running around New York City. Because, yeah, there are people that wash up on New York City streets often, but it's usually linked to something. All right, like this guy jumped off the bridge and then we couldn't find him and then his body washed up 2 days later, something like that. It's not often where it's all in the same area and it's numerous people like coming out of somewhere. I mean, it has to raise an eyebrow to not, if it's raising an eyebrow to the public, it should have raised an eyebrow a long time ago to law enforcement.
And look, I understand why police wouldn't dig further into a decomposed body washing up if there are no obvious signs of trauma, right? Unless this person matched a description of someone reported missing. But the NYPD, they're overworked, underpaid. Why would they start digging if the ME rules a death as undetermined? Why would they want to admit there are more homicides in New York City when the Adams administration has boasted about crime being down? Speaking of the Adams administration, on this podcast, Midnight Currents, we're also going to explore the ties to the corruption in the NYC nightlife scene. Edward Caban, who served as New York City's NYPD commissioner from 2022 until September of 2024, got caught up in a federal corruption probe tied to the NYC nightlife scene, mostly revolving around his twin brother, James Caban. James Caban is a former NYPD officer who was fired in 2021 for misconduct, and he runs a security consulting firm for nightclubs and bars, and the feds suspected he was acting as a quote-unquote fixer, allegedly using his brother Edward's high-up influence to help venues dodge police scrutiny, like ignoring noise complaints or possibly overlooking illegal activities, burying assaults, ODs, in exchange for kickbacks or favors. And Eric Adams once had ties to the Brooklyn Mirage, and allegedly, he pulled some strings to help them obtain their liquor license, not in the most roundabout way. Additionally, his former chief of staff, Frank Carone, served as counsel for the Brooklyn Mirage. The probe into the Cabans kicked off around early 2024 as part of a broader investigation into Mayor Eric Adams. Now, the charges against Eric Adams were dropped at the direction of President Trump. So I don't know if we'll actually know for sure if the feds are still looking into the Cabans or not, but I can certainly look into them. And to put things in perspective here, it was reported, however, not confirmed, 100% not confirmed, that places like the Mirage possibly had their own ambulances for when people OD'd so they wouldn't have to go through the city and they wouldn't have to report it. Again, this is not 100% confirmed, but I thought it was interesting. On the next episode of Midnight Currents, we'll get into the specifics around the deaths of Carl, John, and Damani. Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay vigilant, head on a swivel, and I'll see you next time. I'm Lauren Conlon.